Evening and welcome everyone. Really grateful that everyone is here to Red Pepper Spectacle Arts, the studio here, which is also the Kensington Market Action Committee's space, community space. We are a tenant here sharing with various other community arts organizations or community organizations. So very grateful to be here. Thank you, Sue from KMAC. And so we are here for the Indigenous Treaty Education long-awaited event, and very, very happy that you all could join us. We are in partnership with Waakabeness Institute for Indigenous Health. They are from U of T, the Dalai Lama Public Health, University of Toronto. And I would like to do the land acknowledgement first. I'm going to read it. I hope you don't mind, because public speaking I'm a little bit nervous about, but welcome to everyone. Welcome to everyone out there. Just so everyone knows also that this is a recorded event. And yeah, it's recorded. So the land acknowledgement. Red Pepper Spectacle Arts acknowledges that the sacred land in which we live and work is situated upon the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. This treaty also is the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, and a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and people, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited to this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. Red Pepper is grateful for our Indigenous partnerships, building community collaborative projects, and raising awareness of our shared responsibilities that support Indigenous resurgence. We aim to support and advance progress towards the calls of action as outlined in the final report, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of 2015. Thank you very much. Waakabeness, we have had the opportunity to have partnership with Waakabeness Institute for Indigenous Health, and upon our collaborative works with the Kensington Market Business Improvement Area, with Kensington Market Community Land Trust. We have been working towards a series of events leading up to the 35th anniversary of the Kensington Market Winter Solstice. Yay! Come on. Okay, so and it came together, and thanks to the efforts towards getting funding and all the support and spirit, there are a number of wonderful events, one of which is this, is this the first of the events, but this very important opportunity for intercultural dialogue, and hopefully it will be a continued initiation or continued conversation, and that this is an initiation for Kensington Market's response and responsibility to Truth and Reconciliation. I will just introduce, and also feeling very grateful to Elder and Knowledge Keeper Clayton Shirt. Clayton Shirt, Wolf Clan, Plains, Cree, Anishinaabe of Saddle Lake, Alberta, Treaty 6, and is Waakabeness Elder in Residence, traditional knowledge practitioner of holistic health, wellness, lecturer and educator, and historian. Michael Brown, where are you, Michael? Woo, Michael Brown. Thank you. Stolo Nation, Irish, Métis, and Icelandic ancestry, and Waakabeness Research Officer and Cultural and Spiritual Events Coordinator. He holds an honors undergraduate degree in psychology at York University and a Master of Education degree at OASI, and is currently working on his PhD in social and behavioral science, health sciences of U of T. Thank you very much. We are also, this is part one, we will be reconvening on Friday, November 29th at the Mother Earth Lodge, that Waakabaness at U of T, at 12 to 3. And I'm really grateful that we're all here together. The itinerary, I'm just gonna quickly, I'm almost done, I promise. The 6:15, that's what I wanted to let you know. There will be a light dinner, 6:15, and for 30 minutes. And it is by Candace Catering, Candace Eskima, and has provided wonderful food of Three Sisters soup, bison meatballs, some bannock, some blueberry jam, and strawberry juice. And it's at the back of the room. So that's 30 minutes. And then we will reconvene for another 30 minutes of questions and discussions and dialogue. And then we'll have a closing of the circle around 7:15. So we'll be letting you know. Okay, anything else? Oh, the survey will be circulated to people online after this event, just soon after that. So just, I appreciate if we could have that, you know, your feedback on that. It's very helpful. And just one more note about Waakabaness, and that for Red Pepper and doing our community arts practice and activity working across the GTA. We know the impacts, the health and wellness impacts from our community arts, but with Waakabaness, we're able to continue to understand that in terms of research and data and surveys. So I'm really grateful for Waakabaness. I would like to also, there's Donna, Shanti, and Sabina, who've also been very instrumental. And thank you very much, Owl.
Oh, wait, so one thing about the owl is that they're saying, people on Zoom are saying, or texting me saying they can't see Gabby, and that they can only see me, and I don't want to. So.
Oh, what, so they can't see me right now?
They can't see the person who's speaking. So
Why is
I don't
that?
know, how do we like?
It's just your height, it's like.
I thought maybe.
Just your height,
So
yeah.
then if we have speakers here,
Would it
Yeah,
be
there's
okay?
two-
okay,
Okay.
yeah.
Or they can be sitting.
you didn't get to see me, huh?
It's just
Okay.
your hand.
That's all. Back a little bit, like, we'll see how it works.
Doesn't matter. But I was heard, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time. And so without further ado,
Yeah, no, it's
I
just
will,
a funny thing.
yeah, invite Venerable Shirt.
You want to do the opener or you're gonna?
Yes, please. However you'd like to.
Well, we're gonna take a little smudge.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can just go around smudge.
Okay, thank you.
And, I'll just talk a little bit about the medicine he's gonna be using, that sweetgrass. It grows everywhere here in the Great Lakes. It has three grades, and it represents many things, but it represents the mind, the body, the spirit. And our people have been using it since time immemorial. It's one of our medicines. And to me, it's the most beautiful smell in the world. All of that, which you don't have to smudge if you don't want to. There's no wrong way of smudging. Everybody washes their face, right? So we all wash our faces differently, so and same thing with smudge. But I just sort of say that, picture that the smoke itself is binding us together, right? It's weaving its way, it's creating a circle. And so whenever we have a conversation or ceremony, we all come together in circle, and it just binds us together, and it allows us to, it's a medicine, right? It helps our minds so we can think and see things clearly. And it's from our mother, right? And we say it's part of her hair, and we burn it to connect to the earth, the sun, the sky, creation, to our mother, the earth. So usually an elder, a knowledge keeper, a knowledge holder, a practitioner would get up and do an opening prayer. As my good friend said, I'm an elder, but I don't, that's what they say, okay? So elders are something, I as you can tell, I'm not that old, right? So, you know, I got some gray hairs and everything, but in our way of life, and elders, we hold them to the highest level, right? But as we're all in this dominant culture, they gotta give us titles, right? So the title of knowledge keeper, knowledge holder, I'm not comfortable with any of them, right? I just wanna make that clear. I'm not holding on to anything, I'm not keeping anything, and an elder is somebody with great wisdom, and I barely know anything, so. But titles, practitioner, I'll use that word practitioner. So you could say, well, what are you practicing, right? I'm just practicing my culture, our spiritual ways of knowing and being. And there's lots of us here, I'll just point this out, you all came with a view, right? Religious view, agnostic view, atheist view, spiritual view, right? One of those main views, right? Many other. But we can all agree on this one thing, like we are the people, right? The human beings, before we're anything else. That's what an elder would remind us, right? The gift what it is to be a human being. We are spirit experiencing something. Your bone, my bone, your flesh, your blood, liquids minute of the earth, right? Humans, right? The being comes from our relationship, your relationship to the sun, to the sky, to the universe. All things of the earth have being, but we're the human beings. So the elder would just acknowledge this as we come together in ceremony, right? They acknowledge who we are, what we are, the human beings. And we're magnificent beings, but we're also very pitiful beings at the same time. We have no fang, we have no claw, we have no fur, we have no feathers, we have none of these. Our four-legged friends, the crawlers, the swimmers, they do. That's their gifts. But who are we? We're the people, right? We're the human beings coming together and have a conversation in ceremony. So we invite spirit in. That's what the elder does. That's what the knowledge keeper does. The practitioner would get up and say a few words and say, invite spirit. So I'm gonna attempt to do that, right? So usually they stand, I guess I'll stand. But
I can sit down here.
Okay.
One of the people. So I guess I can just jump into it, but first I will introduce myself. So, there we go. Hi everybody, I'm Michael Brown. As Gabby said, been in school for a long time, and I've read a lot of things, and not all of them have been helpful. I come from Stala Nation Irish background and Treaty 8 First Nation and Icelandic ancestry, and I wasn't raised in the culture at all, and have been having to find my way back to ceremony, back to the teachings, back to spaces like this. And so thank you, Clay, for bring me back. And so today I guess I'm going to be talking about the teachings, or the treaty. And so Toronto is on Treaty 13 territory. And does anybody know about Treaty 13? Does anybody know how big Treaty 13 is? Well, it's pretty big, and it was bought for not a lot of money. Turns out it was bought for about $27. So if anybody's got that much, let's buy it back right now. But for me, what the Treaty 13 came down to, or comes down to, is that shared responsibility of taking care of this land. Before contact, we knew how sacred this land was and how much we rely on Mother Earth and this land, especially this area of land, to survive and to feed our families and to build our homes and to sustain ourselves. And so when the settlers came over, they didn't know how to do any of that, and they needed a lot of help, and so we helped them out. And at the end of all that, we have the treaty, and they just kind of try to take everything. But still, we remembered that we have this responsibility to this place, to this land, to take care of it with each other. And again, as Gabby mentioned before, it's not just Native people, it's not just European settlers anymore. It's such a diversity. If you look at the market itself, so much diversity. And that's what's really built this community, this city of Toronto is built on that diversity, all of us coming together under that shared responsibility of taking care of the land, which Clay has mentioned we are part of. So as we take care of each other, that's also part of that responsibility. And Kensington Market's a very unique part of the city in that you can see a lot of that community. You can see a lot of that community togetherness you can tell when somebody's not from the market, and that's how I can tell that it's such a special place. Because yeah, you can always tell who's not part of the market, just kind of touring through. But even when I was one of those people, I was always welcomed into this place. It's always been like a little refuge from the chaos of the city. You know, finding all these little knickknacks and cool little art spots that just don't seem to be appreciated in the rest of the city, in the busy world. But yeah, that's really what the treaties come down to for me. It's really that shared responsibility of not just the land, but everything on the land too. Everything in the land, everything running through the land, including the waters. Yeah. Anything you'd like to add?
No, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'll wait.
And so, I mean, there's some cool facts that I've learned about the Treaty 13, including the fact that the first attempt at the treaty was a really, really vague treaty where somebody basically decided that if they shoot their gun and you can hear it, you're on their land. And that just didn't hold up in court, really. So what it came down to was, I mean, this is like extra stuff, but what it came down to was they basically went back to Britain and then had a conversation and then came back and was like, no, that's not legit. And then I had to redo it into what was actually the Toronto Purchase Treaty, which again, very interesting. Aside from the whole $27 purchase thing, it's supposed to be anything above a foot off the ground was in the treaty, but anything within a foot off the ground was not part of the treaty. Still considered Indigenous owned, which I think is fascinating because that means all the buildings should be floating. The sidewalk should be floating. That's not their property, you know? So there's been a lot of lawsuits contesting the treaties and the exchange that went on to compensate that. And it's gotten really messy. And so my conclusion from looking up all of these treaties and all the information is that it's one of the most confusing and simple things I've ever come across, which is very confusing. Lots of big words, lots of very confusing phrasing, but it came down to ownership. Somebody wanted to own it, which just doesn't make sense. It's the earth. It's not to be owned. It's to be celebrated and prayed to and protected, and just like we would our own family, just like we would our own children. Yeah, I mean, does anybody have any questions about the trees or where we are right now in the market?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is this the dish with one spoon territory?
Yes.
Okay, can you talk a little bit about that?
I don't have much authority to talk about the wampums, but from what I have heard, it does come back to that shared responsibility. The earth is it's one dish, and we have to share it. And the treaty makes it very clear that it's not, the intention is not to share it. And the people come together every single time and remind the government that it is very much so about sharing, not just the ownership or the property, but the responsibility and the protection of everything. If that makes sense. If that answers your question. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
I'm not sure I understood what is not part of the treaty, what, like 1 foot.
There was a weird clause in the Toronto Purchase that said the land could be used if, but only between 11 and 13 inches off of the ground. So I was trying to make sense of that in my own head, and the only thing I could come up with, which I don't know if it's accurate or not, is harvesting of wheat and different kind of natural resources where you wouldn't just chop it all the way down. You would kind of keep it alive and just take what you need. So in the agreement, it looks like what was agreed upon was, yes, you can use the land if you need food or resources, if you need to pick berries, if you need to harvest this, you're free to do so. But leave the land alone. Like, don't start pulling things out, don't start changing things. Like, that's not our work. Our work is if we need food, we can go and get some food. But it was a weird stipulation of about a foot. Anything above a foot off the ground was part of the treaty. Anything below a foot was not part of the treaty. So it was a really strange, and it just stuck out for me.
But in terms of ownership, like the foot
Anything between
below a
the
foot
earth
to the earth was belonging to the crown?
to indigenous people,
Okay,
It was
above
never-
it was for,
for
Settlers,
settlers.
right.
Yeah,
Well,
oh,
for everyone, not just settlers.
right,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
But in that situation, it was an inviting in of the settlers to join in of the use of it.
Yeah.
I guess if that makes more sense.
Mhm.
And then on top of that, a lot of people, there was like the Underground Railroad, so a lot of like slaves ended up seeking and finding refuge up here. A lot of Chinese immigrants that were a lot of the time forcibly brought here to build the railroads, and a lot of other national construction projects continue to be oppressed by the same systems, the same treaty policies. They got tacked on there. I mean, I could go on and on about the racist policy side of things, but my point of all of that is we've all ended up in the same space, and we've all managed to come together and to build strong relationships with each other and strong communities with each other, not just from that shared colonization stuff, but from the inspiration through the leadership, through that love that you could so clearly feel in here. That's to me what's brought everybody together, and that to me is what the treaty was supposed to be about. Was about that collective effort.
I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
So, I love the idea and the wording. You can tell that the wording of the treaties is very much not European. And they were
Yeah.
trying to fit it into their legal system. And this 1 foot thing makes sense to me because, you know, when the French and British were coming into what's known as Canada now, they just wanted to cut the trees and harvest things, like
Yeah.
natural resources, if you will. It's curious, so under that treaty, there should have been no mining or excavation of our beautiful escarpment, which is turned into the cement towers downtown, for instance. Has there been any respectful negotiation or dialogue with the Ontario government to honor those treaties? Because, I mean, it's all very well to say we're under these treaties, but, you know, the example of the escarpment, for instance, tells me they're not respecting it. So are there moves now to create that kind of mutual respect?
I'm gonna say no, like pretty hard no on that. Given the escarpment, given the Greenbelt given. It seems to be a lot of reworking of the old racist policies to continue what they're doing in an acceptable way, but it's just as disrespectful. It's just as harmful to the land. It's not a protective intention from my perspective, at least. It seems very much business oriented. That's my perspective on that.
Is anybody thinking about how do we turn this into something that actually does respect
Oh yes.
the treaties?
Oh yes. Is it coming from government? No. It's coming from spaces like this.
And the government, like, has it even replaced old things like are they still working through the lens of the Indian Act? Has that even been updated? Like,
That I'm not sure. I am fairly certain that it's still in effect, the Indian Act, which kind of tells you right there that it's not a great relationship between Indigenous people and the government or the Crown, and it doesn't seem like they have any intention on bettering those relationships.
and you personally, because of course you can't speak for everybody, what do you think some of the next steps could be? Like, how do we envision honoring what was originally agreed to?
From my perspective, that's a really good question, and I do think about it a lot because it is the work that I do. I would say it comes down to, again, this is my perspective on it. I would say that it comes down to what I've heard termed as cultural humility, which
What was that? I'm
applies
sorry.
cultural humility, which colonization has a huge struggle with, again, from my perspective. But that cultural humility looks to be one of the most
Can you describe what that means?
similarly to how we all sit at the same level, like height level, we're all in the same circle. Very similar to that, as opposed to sitting at the top of a tower looking down, being like, they could use another shelter over there. It's more about seeing each other at eye level, I guess, and respecting that you might have a culture that's different than my culture, which includes values, which includes a complete understanding of the universe, if that's part of the understand, like it goes all the way down to the fundamental understanding of existence, very philosophical side of things. But knowing and understanding that my culture isn't better than your culture isn't better than my culture. It's not that one culture is right or one culture is wrong. It just is. So if the culture here is Mississauga, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, we need to respect that no matter what our culture is, and vice versa. You know, there's no. I guess what it comes down to in a phrase is, you're allowed to be who you are, I guess. And that is not the case in colonial policy or the treaties or anything like that, especially the Indian Act that says you can't be that, you have to be this. If you want to be that, this is the label for you. It's very, trying to avoid academic terms. The only word I know for this is hegemony, which is defined as knowing or putting yourself above someone else and being the expert over someone who determines who's an expert. I don't know. Maybe I'm just making this more confusing.
No, I think it's really helpful. What came to mind for me was, you know, having had the benefit of traveling a lot in the world. When I go into a new country, I try to respect what's going on there. We're at a disadvantage here because we don't even know how to respect it yet. What preceded speaking as a new immigrant to Canada, so to speak. Because we don't even know what that is. We don't know what that looks like. We don't. So getting that out there so that we can know how to do that.
That we can, I'm sorry, that we can.
That we can honor, we can only honor what we know, honor, value, respect things. And, you know, I suspect that it has to be reinvented because so much has been lost through residential schools and through all kinds of other.
See, I used to
Things.
think that it was lost, and some of it is lost, but it's not all lost. Indigenous people are very, I hate this word again because it's such a common narrative these days, but resilient, right? There's that resiliency. I tend to refer to them as those who remembered. There's some warriors in our cultures that, despite all of the colonization efforts, despite the residential schools, despite the day schools, despite the 60 scoop, despite, you know, all of those things, they still held on to the language, they still held on to the teachings, they still held on to those ceremonies, those protocols. And part of my work as an Oshkosh is going around and finding all of these teachings before they pass on. And I mean, maybe that's the way forward, maybe that's the way to honor and respect the agreements and that relationship, is because I don't really care to, you know, honor the treaty as much as I want to honor the people and the land itself, right? Like the treaty itself is really just something the British government wrote up one day and decided was the case, when, I mean, that's not cultural humility at all. And so I think, like, going back to that, how do we move forward in an honorable and respectful way? It's listening to those ones who remembered, going back to the ceremonies, going back to the medicines, going back to those teachings. And the only way we can do that is with cultural humility. I mean, even myself, not raised in the culture, voice is getting gravelly. Had to unlearn all of those things and start completely over as if I was a little toddler. Felt very vulnerable, like very stupid and dumb and ignorant, and I had to sit with that until, well, I'm still sitting with that. I'm still very ignorant on a lot of things, but I have to keep moving forward and keep listening, keep going to ceremonies, keep my connection with spirit, my connection with the land, my connection with community and with the people. That's how I personally try to honor and respect things, and despite what's going on, I just try to do my own small part and try to model that really for the next ones as best I can. And then through that humility, teaching again, letting them know that I'm not perfect and I probably am doing a lot wrong still. So, like, ask your questions and like, do your part, really. Don't just like follow me blindly, you know. I'm just another person trying to make my way.
Good. I think time-wise, we got a few more minutes. I just wanted to go into the spiritual part of treaties, because I've studied the treaties a lot in my life, and I always wanted to know the other side. There's the western part of the treaties, right? You talk about the treaties, and here's the thing, right? I encourage you all just to you go to grandfather Google, right? Alright, and look up the doctrine of discovery, alright? Start with that, you look that up, right? And you just sort of, and it's like, oh, okay, wait a minute, that was 500 years ago, alright? So you look that up, and what that document says, it sets the tone for all policies. That's what treaties are, policies, right? Western terms we're talking, right? The Europeans made their treaties amongst themselves. They started, their resources were depleting, so they started going off into the world and then started all the trouble, right? Called colonialism, all right? I'll just stop with that, all right? Our perspective, as Indigenous people, we made treaties amongst ourselves before they got here, right? There's over 500 nations here. We all, and one of the biggest misconceptions I hear about, we're these people who lived in the earth, the sun, and all the way I mentioned, no, we slaughtered each other too, just like the Europeans did, right? Just like the tribes, we all come from a tribe, remember that. Tribes of Asia, Africa, Europe, right? They evolved, and we're tribal people, and so we made treaties amongst ourselves first, right? So those treaties are agreements, right? Well, a lot of people say, I hear they say treaty, but they don't put their peace treaties, right, amongst themselves. So they take the word out peace, right? So a treaty is all about peace, right? It's about reconciliation, right? Right, the Europeans, I always joke about, they brought the wreck to reconciliation. Right? So all of that, but the point is, it's really important to really look at it. I often, when I was a young person wanted to know about the self and spirituality, I always wanted, what were they thinking about, right? Because you had the Europeans, they were saying, okay, we're expanding, this is a young country, Americans, Canadians, and so they made, in a funny way, they made treaties with the Indians because they wanted to prove to Big Brother over there and the Europeans that, look, we're a country too, we make treaties, right? So there's that perspective, right? And then also seeing, but you have to, the treaties are based in racism, right? The core of itself, it's racist, sexist views, right? What I mean by that is because what I said in the prayer, because when Columbus came here, he met some people, right? They asked him this question, who are you? And the reply was, right? Columbus asked them, he said, who are you? And the reply was, we're the human beings. Who are you? Right? And they came with race, gender, class, etc., flags and all of that stuff, right? All these other identities. So the Indigenous people always recognize themselves as a people. So as people, they made treaties with other people. There's over 500 nations here, right? And eventually we figured this out, right? So we talk about wampum, we talk about the true wampum belt. I can't talk about that. I won't, because I'm not from that nation. But the essence is the treaties were there. It's spiritual agreements of you stay there, we stay here. Well, let's talk, let's reconcile, we'll share the land. The concept again of ownership is not there, right? How can you own something that is the mother, right? And if you look back in the history of Europeans, they saw the earth as a mother too. Everybody saw the earth as a mother, and that's another lecture. Gonna take hours, so we don't have that kind of time, right? But again, the treaties were. I often wondered about them. They were spiritual agreements. The reality is that if governments, they come and go, right? If they honored the first treaties, there's new treaties and old treaties, right? So there's some old treaties, and half of the treaties with the Indigenous people are signed treaties, and half of them are, and there's a quarter of them are not, unsettled treaties, right? So you can look that up yourself, right? All of that. So what I'm trying to get at is there were spiritual agreements. So so it was basically the tribes were trying to make a deal basically with this power, right? And we were interested, here's one of the other things, we were interested in their technology too, right? Right? The gun, the horse, etc. Right? It made life easier for us, right? And we quarreled amongst ourselves for a while. All of this, but the treaties were the spiritual agreement because we had the ability to sit with our ancestors. That's why the opening prayer was. So they were well thought out on our perspective of the Indigenous populations, right? The tribes. They thought and they sat for days and weeks in ceremony, talking about them, right? Sitting in ceremony and consulting with ancestors in their ceremonies and making the best deal, right? What is the best thing for the next 7 generations for our people, right? The Europeans, we know this. They're not going away, right? They're here. They're our brothers, right? And they were brothers first because the women came later, right? And that's why you have the Métis Nation, right? All of that, right? All of this. But we also made, what was the best deal, right? How can we, and they said, well, we're gonna honor this, we're here, and we want you people to hear, but we want the best deal, so what is it? So now you're gonna educate us, right, in your traditions, in your ways, right? And the problem with that is governments have reneged on all of that. They've broken every treaty, right? Every treaty that ever created, right, that they came up with, Canadians, Americans, whatever treaty they came up with, they've broken. But they kept one promise, and this is the promise, they can take everything, right? They've broken every promise, that's what a treaty is, right? But everything is to take everything, and they're still trying to do that to this day, right? Because look around, right? We're still fighting, right? We're still trying to find our identity, right? And we're still in a place of relearning our way of life, right? And this is the thing about Indigenous culture, we're always gonna share and we always will, right? And so there's a treaty there. So I encourage people to make the treaty with themselves first, right? You know what I mean? Reconcile with the self, right? And what I mean by that is what reconciling with the self means is connecting your mind to your heart, right? Because we're in a very interesting time right now. If you look around, the preserve, right? They want to preserve culture. They want to preserve their way of life, which is fine. And then there's innovation, right? Our people were preservers at one time. We held on to the traditions, and also we're into innovation about creating. We're in an interesting time now where the preservers just want to preserve things again. What I mean by that is all they want to do, right, is preserve their way of life. They want the good old days to come back, right? Well, it wasn't so good for my people. It wasn't so good for women either, right? Or people of color. So you have the preserve of culture again, right? So again, I know I'm jumping around in history, but the point is, all you really have to understand about the treaties is they were agreements. Governments do not honor them. They haven't. Because the reality is that we would be thriving as Indigenous people. We would thrive, right? Because our ancestors sat there and said, from one nation to another nation, said, look, this is what, we know you're here, right? We know you're not going away, right? We're interested in some of your things, right? But we also want to hold on to our way of life. We want to preserve a way of our life, our instructions on how to live a good life with the earth, the sun, sky, and creation, right? Totally different view now, right? Because they saw the land as ownership, right? So the concepts are different, right? But now we're trying to, as you go through history, the last 500 years of genocide, right? You're talking genocide now, right? Indian policy, right? Somebody mentioned the Indian Act, etc. Just go down the line. Start with the Doctrine of Discovery, and you'll see that it set the tone for all policies for the last 500 years towards people of all Indigenous people of the world, right? So again, and those policies were there, and then so they wanted to make treaties, right? All of this. So treaties are very important, and I think about it when I was, because I had some time to think about what I wanted to say today, and if you look at historical pictures of I come from Treaty 6, and I see my ancestors all sitting around talking to government officials, right? My ancestors sat in ceremony, right? And they consulted with their ancestors. They meditated, they prayed, they said, okay, what can we come up with to help us for the next 7 generations, right? And again, the other side hasn't honored them, right? And this is what all the problems are about now. So when we talk about Treaty 1 here is this territory. And that's very controversial right now because it hasn't been honored, right? So as the Europeans were spreading, pushing all the way to the west, right? Constantly pushing, constantly coming across these other tribes, and they made deals with each one of them, right? And sometimes they get them to fight amongst themselves, right? Because you're talking about history in the 1700s, the 1800s, et cetera, right? Because some of us wanted their technology and kept it away from other people, the other tribes. All of that was going on, right? So it's really hard to talk about 500 years in a couple of hours, guys. But I really want you to take away that the treaties have never been honored, right? Because look at our people, we're broken, right? And we're in the process of healing ourselves again. We're picking up our medicines again, our language, our way of life, everything. We're doing it all over. So it puts us in a weird place, because I'm not a preserver. I don't want to preserve something. I want innovation at the same time, like my ancestors, right? So the question is to keep the balance of those two attitudes of preserve, because look around, right? This place, Kensington, I'll just put things into context, right? Kensington Market's under threat, right? All of this and everything, right? And so our people understood this, right? So you have to think about it. Well, I wanna I can borrow from the past, right? Look towards the future, but I need to be present, right? To understand what's going on, and that's understanding the historical trauma, the genocide, and to look at that stuff and say, okay, right, how did I benefit from this? How did my ancestors benefit from this? Because two people have benefited, both sides. Some people benefited from this and some people didn't, right? So you gotta look at those treaties, but they're agreements of nation to nation talking to each other, having a dialogue, and those conversations, when I looked at them, they took days, weeks, right? It just wasn't a few hours and all of this and people and having that conversation. So this is a good place to start, but I encourage you to look at, just start with that, and things will start going into, it'll all start making sense of this is how this policy ended up here, right? The Indian Act, the Royal Proclamation, etc., right? And all, because we're in the research business, right? Sort of, I call it a business, right? and it's just, and so, but there's another point of view of, there's Western research, and then there's ours. Ours is a view of ceremony. Ceremony's research. Same thing as my ancestors, right? They sat in ceremony, right? And they asked, well, how do I make this deal with my brother here? I don't really understand. They're not going away, but how do I make this deal, right? And that's what a treaty is, basically, if you break it down. So you can use the word treaty, right? But that's what it is. A treaty is an agreement from nation to nation, and it varies, right? From all these people. So I encourage you to do your homework. You all have your external brain, right? Called your phone, right? Grandfather Google, right? You can look this stuff up, right? So that's when I was really interested, and I really thought about, because nobody asked those questions. What were they thinking about, right? And it's all a historical fact of all the kings and queens and governments, etc., right? Their point of view of treaties, right? But I often was so fascinated, well, what does that mean as an Indigenous person, for me, myself, to sit in ceremony, to learn that again, right? Because that was taken from us, right? And I made I don't have any issues with any of them anymore, right? I reconciled with that a long time ago, right? But a lot of our youth are still angry, right? About the genocide, etc., and everything. A lot of people still are, and that's okay, right? It's just up to us now, right? To have the conversation. So what does that mean to us? And I'll just quote Murray St. Clair: education got us into this mess, right? Right, and education is gonna get us out of this mess, right? So educating ourselves, we all have the technology now to do this, right? You can all go to your grandfather Google, right? And I've really looked at, I can't stress this more, look up the doctrine of discovery. It's a brutal law, right? Because what it's saying is, because they went, like when Columbus, 1492, he went back to Europe and they gave him the doctrine of discovery, right? A document And what that is saying is we have supreme authority from God to do whatever, to take whatever we want from a non-Christian, right? So imagine that, that's a policy now, right? That just spread, right? It gave them the authority to set the tone for all policies. And so treaties, right? They're rooted in racism, they're rooted in sexism, they're rooted in all of that, right? Their point of view, right? Because remember, it was a male-oriented thing, right? And it's still kind of, right? It's just, I don't want to get into that, but I'm jumping around in history. But in the last 500 years, you gotta look at all those things into the present day of treaties. So now the youth are stepping up and saying, well, okay, right, honor these treaties, right, these land claims, etc. And governments are saying, okay, so they get boggled down in this nonsense and nothing happens, right? Because again, my people would be thriving, right? So we need support, right? That's education, that's you, and also there's a lot of people who supported us at the same time, right? Civil rights, human rights, etc. Right? It's all connected, right? So treaties are very important. They're a spiritual agreement on our point of view, right? There's a spirit to them, right? On the other side, not so much, right? All of that. But that's when I started looking at them in that way, I started wanting to understand that, right? What were they thinking, right? What were they doing, right? Why were they doing all this? And it really made sense to me because there has to be a treaty with amongst yourself, right? That's connecting your mind to your heart, right? The heart is what, the mind wants to preserve things, right? Memorize things, right? The heart is all about innovation, growth, right? Because the mind takes things apart, does it not? It attacks things, it absorbs, attacks things, takes things apart. And my people will say, I'll say this about them, we were known as the people of the heart, right? We had this a love for the land, right? We saw, most of the world does not see it like that anymore. Very few of us see the earth as a mother. Anyone in this room, right? A few, right? So there you go, you're a majority here, but the majority are not. The world, we don't see it like that anymore. But if you dig far enough, if you look back wherever you come from, you can see we all saw the earth as the mother, right? She provides everything for us. So how can you own something? She's a living being. Science now proves it, right? She's a living being, right? So the concept of ownership, I'm getting the signal here, wrap it up.
Oh, no,
Okay.
no.
Oh, I thought
was
you were
just
telling me
gonna-
to wrap
I
it
was
up.
just gonna I was thinking about the doctrine of discovery and essentially, but that's the point of it. It doesn't respect
Yeah,
humans'
yeah,
human life, let
Yeah.
alone the earth's life,
Right.
or, you know, the things that come from the earth, you know,
Exactly.
it didn't respect,
so
yeah,
we're
who was
talking
there,
about
yeah.
what Michael was pointing towards is respect, right? So cultivate and respect for a different point of view of treaties and understanding all that. I think that's the key. It's about respecting. And this dominant culture doesn't talk about that. They talk about tolerance, right? Tolerance just means I can stand you, right? That's all it means, right? I tolerate a lot of things, right? But the point is cultivate and respect for each other. That takes, again, our minds and our hearts connected. So reconcile with ourselves first. I had to do that first before I understood the treaties. Again, what my ancestors did. Does that all make sense? Right? Because the mind is all about preserving things, knowledge, holding memory, etc. Right? But the heart is about innovation, right? And then, again, I'm going off topic, but I'm not. My elders always said, the longest journey that you're ever gonna have, Clayton, is connecting those two things. And it's only 18 inches, right? So again, the heart, right? It's about innovation, right? And it scares me now, cause they're not, you know, what everybody's talking about is preserving things, right? There has to be a balance, right? Cause I'm looking around here, there's some young people here, and I'm looking around, there's some older people, you guys remember now, right? Right, and you know, in the eighties and the nineties, you know, all of this stuff, right? And that's a huge movement that brought us to the present, the last 30, 40 years, right? That's called Reaganomics, right? And he was all about preserving a way of life, right? And now we're feeling the effects of all of that, right? These young people are feeling all of that. They weren't even around, right? And this, what I'm saying, what I'm trying to get at is the rhetoric I hear now, right? Of preserving something, the good old days, right? Of a small minority, a small group of running everything again, right? That's called conservative, right? Neoconservative, and the world is turning into that again, right? You can just look around, right? And it kind of scares me. And so again, making those treaties with ourselves, right? And so if that makes sense, I don't know if it does, right? But again, I'll just stop and I'll just say, all you really need to know about treaties is they were a spiritual agreement, right? With another nation, right? And we need to honor them and keep them talking about it, keep these young ones talking about that. Because again, our people would thrive, right? And here's the thing, if we thrive, you thrive too, right? Right? That's the difference, right? Your children will benefit from it, right? Because we stand up for something called the earth, right? And you don't have a right to it, and you shouldn't be doing this to it, right? And we're all about innovation, right? The reality is technology is not going away, and I don't want it to go away, right? I like my phone, right? Right? I like my car, right? All of these things, and I don't want to go back to a wigwam. They're cold, right? But I understand them and everything, and so again, right? That's what treaties are all about to me, right? And you have much other people who can talk much more about the other side of them, the laws, the policies, etc., and everything and all that. But again, I'm saying, I'm repeating myself, they're rooted in racism, right? You really look at them, right? And all of this, and there's the struggle that we're all trying to get through. And I think places like this sort of say, hey, here's a place where you can take refuge from that, right? Come together as a people, right? And share, right? Innovation, right? Because I was looking at all these beautiful things. I don't understand them, but they're beautiful, right? And that's what I love about the arts too, right? The arts is all about innovation, right? It's the spirit expressing itself, right? That's why I love art. I'm not good at any of it, right? But I love artists, right? And I think so. So anyways, I can go on and on about them, but I won't. So, and I often say to a lot of my students, people, don't believe anything I just told you, right? Please don't. Just think about it. Let that energy of thought flow and see what happens, I say. All right, so be rich.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to Candace Catering for the wonderful food. There's lots of food and you can take home.
So good.
Okay, so we're going to resume this wonderful evening, and I want to acknowledge by offering sacred tobacco as a show of reciprocity from ourselves to Wakabanes, to the knowledge keepers, and just that the tobacco is a sacred medicine and show of respect. So,
Miigwech, thank you.
miigwech, thank you very much.
Sister.
And then Michael, thank you very much, miigwech. And also for Donna, miigwech. And extending also to. Okay. So, and what we also, we also neglected to do proper introductions around that we had in the itinerary earlier, so we'll take the opportunity now to do our introductions quickly, briefly around the room. We had intended to do that earlier, and so we'll do that now. Thank you.
You start.
Oh.
Come in,
Okay.
whoever you are.
My name is Gabriella Caruso, settler. My family is from Friuli, Italy. I'm Furlane and from Lucane, also the regions of Italy, First Nations in Italy, but born here in Toronto. Mother of 2 adult children, and I'm just very grateful to be here. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Scarlett Rose. I'm Dene First Nations and Scottish. I'm a youth lead artist here at Red Pepper, and I'm really happy to be here. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Carla. Hi, everybody. My name is Sabina Mirza. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at Waakavaness Institute for Indigenous Health, and it's really great to be hosting this event with you, Gabby.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Shanti Aguilar Cardenas. I was born on Treaty 1 territory, also known as Winnipeg, and my ancestors are from what is now called Guatemala. So I'm mestiza, mixed ancestry, and I work at Waakavaness as a research assistant. Nice to meet everybody here. Where should we go to next?
Should we do that? Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Kevin Barrett. What a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the teaching so far. I'm a settler who was born on unceded land in Western Canada, and make Kensington Market my home now. And I'm here through my work as a volunteer co-chair of the Kensington Market Community Land Trust. So just want to say thank you for lots of things to think about land in this context. So.
Hi everyone, my name is Zach. I'm the co-director of the Kensington Market Community Land Trust. Settler with Irish and English ancestry. I was born in Oshawa and spent time there and in Ottawa, and then the last 7 years or so been here in Toronto. And feeling very grateful to be here, so thank you.
I'm just gonna jump in as well to apologize and ask you for your forgiveness. The Land Trust has a number of community events going on tonight, and I'm gonna slip out fairly shortly. I'm sorry for the interruption. I'm sorry I can't be here for the end. I have to go get ready for another group of our community coming together to talk about building affordable housing. So I'll slip out and not cause more disruption.
Hi, my name is Akash Bansal. I am working at the Kensington Market Land Trust as the event coordinator for this festival that this event's a part of. I'm a settler here. My family is from Punjab in India. And I'm very happy to be here. I'm really excited to have everyone here.
Hi, my name's Sam. I'm Métis on my mom's side of the family from Calahoo, Alberta, and then on my dad's side, I'm Chinese and Acadian, born and raised in Ottawa, and I work at the Stop Community Food Center as one of the coordinators of the Indigenous program that we have in partnership with Native Men's Residents, and I do some native plant restoration work along the Humber River in Toronto, and yeah, I'm grateful to be here and to be learning. Thanks.
Oh, hi, I'm Camilo, and I work here in Love with Gabby. That's it.
Hello everybody, I'm Sean Gray, third or fourth generation settler, English, Scottish, Hungarian, and live here. I've been living in Toronto for many years with my family, my children, 3 children, and grandchildren as well. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you, Gabby. Everybody.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Ana Raquel. From Mestiza, also from Central America, from El Salvador, now from the land that now is called El Salvador. I'm an associate artist at Red Pepper, and very thankful, very grateful to be here tonight as well.
Hi, my name is Lucero. I'm from Mexico, Aguascalientes, Mexico. Hot water.
Hot water.
And I work here in Red Pepper. Thank you for sharing. And I feel happy. to be here. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Emily. I am Mushkegowuk Cree from James Bay on my father's side, and I am Nishnawbe and Acadian on my mother's side. And I work here at Red Pepper, and I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah.
My name's Dominique, and yep, I'm a Franco-Ontarian anyway, and raised 3 children in the market. I've been in Kensington Market for 30-something years, and I'm the co-director with of the Kensington Market Community Land Trust. I'm really grateful to be here and to be learning and to be starting this, what I hope will be a series of conversation.
Hi, I'm Sue. I'm really glad to be here. I raised 2 kids in this neighborhood, so love it. Hope we can keep it alive. We're working hard for that, and I'm really grateful for tonight's conversation.
I'm Clay, you already know who I am, so I'll just pass it on to a good friend here.
Hi everybody, my name is Donna Rosehill. I come from 6 Nations in Brantford. I'm of the Mohawk, Haudenosaunee on my dad's side, British on my mom's side, so mixed background. I joined Wakabanass as the administrative assistant about a year and a little bit ago, and I come to this organization much like Michael, not knowing much about my background and sort of being in a process of like reclaiming my Indigenous ancestry and Indigenous culture, and so I appreciate talks like this. So it gives me a good opportunity to keep learning more and more about my own history and the history of the land here and the people who've lived here before us. So I'm super thankful for that. Yes, English.
I'm gonna move here so I can see who I'm talking to. My name is David Perlman. I arrived here from South Africa in 1975. I came as a student at the University of Toronto, but in the knowledge that I wasn't going back. And I found Kensington Market on my 3rd day in Toronto. I found the Brunswick House the 1st day, and Honest Ed's on the 2nd day. And I've been living continuously in and around this area for almost 50 years, and right in the market since 1985. My partner and I have had 4 children, of whom 3 of them were born right in the market, and my children are between 30 and 40 years old at this point. And I and some other people started a neighborhood newspaper in the late 1980s called the Kensington Market Drum. And really felt like we were connecting with community. But we're having an event starting tomorrow at 86 Nassau in the gallery, a look back at the Kensington Drum. And there was no land acknowledgement in the Kensington Market Drum. So I have a lot to learn.
Is that leaves me, yeah. So I've introduced myself before, but I'll do it again. My name is Michael Brown. I'm a research officer and cultural spiritual events coordinator for Waakabanes. I'm also a second year PhD student at U of T. Stalo Irish on my dad's side, and Treaty 8 First Nation and Icelandic on my mom's side. And I mean, I grew up in Scarborough, and so was always down here whenever I could, trying to just not be home and get into trouble. And so, you make your way downtown when you're in that mood. And this is really where I first saw and started to emulate the people being themselves and not trying to perform some other part of society. People were just artisting out down here, and I love that. So much.
So we're going to take questions and have open discussion, continue on with our discussion. So if anyone would like to bring up a question or a thought or.
We have a question from online.
Yes.
So I'll just read that out. It comes from Brent online. So he says, treaties are originally signed nation to nation. Unfortunately, this treaty relationship has become nation under nation, not nation to nation, as disputes are directed through the Canada's court system, and Canada has the final say. So therefore, there's a minimal honor of the Crown to uphold treaty rights in Canada, as many treaties are pre-Confederation treaties. So therefore, signed with Great Britain, and there was no consultation regarding these treaties when they were downloaded to present-day Canada, or like post Confederation. So, what are your thoughts on this?
I'll try to answer that. He's talking about, I'll put things into context what he's talking about. When the Europeans were here, right, and they were making treaties with the Indigenous people of this territory in the East, all of this, their side, I'll go on their side of the Europeans, they wanted to understand our language, our ways, and so they said, we're speaking on the behalf of the Great Mother, that's the Queen, right? So, and we understood that, right? So now you're talking, so there's old treaties, right, with the Queen, Great Mother, right? And then there's the new treaties. So, but you can't have it both ways, right? Because Canada still has a connection to the Queen, right? So they use that as an excuse to say, well, those are old treaties, we're a sovereign country now, etc. Let those go.
Right. It's really interesting.
But you can't have it both ways, right? You're either connected to the Queen or you're not, right? And so, I mean, so it's really one of those arguments. So the treaties, it gets into law now, that's not my thing. It gets very complicated, guys, right? Treaties, they can get very, very complicated. So you have to put it into context. That's what he's talking about, right? And it's a good question, because I had to ask myself the same question, right? Because today the youth are fighting for Indigenous rights, land claims, treaty rights, and so they have to do all that research. Again, our connection, right? Research, connecting all the dots and saying, okay, yeah, but again, it goes back to, you can't have it both ways, right? So that's the argument. So it gets all tied up in the courts, etc., and everything, right? So nothing gets really done. It just ends up in the courts in an argument, etc., right? So hopefully that answered the question. I don't know if it did, right? But you gotta put things into context and history. Just remember, the first treaties were with the Great Mother, the Queen. That's what we called her, all right? That's what they called her. I can't remember the guy's name. I'm horrible with names. But when he was negotiating treaties, you can look the guy's name, Grandfather Google again, all right? And you just look it up, and then you see the guy's name, and that's what he called that Great Mother, right? So everything, but they're really, complex they can be, right? But again, I like the history. It's a dark chapter in Canadian history, guys. It takes courage to look at them, because we can take it personally, and a lot of people do, right? It's a very dark chapter in Canadian history towards Indigenous people, and in the spirit of truth and reconciliation. That's why I asked my new friend here, is Courage My Love still around, right? Because that was in the beginning, because my parents used to go there, and they knew the people, the original owners, and I don't know if they're still around.
Yes, they are.
There you go,
Same
right?
family
So same
running,
family,
and their
so
their children are running.
yeah,
And
so
grandchildren.
so when my parents came here in the 70s, they all hung out the same place, right? And Grossman's and everything, right? And everything, all that, and they were here. And so Courage My Love, and there was a huge movement going on, right? This is the 70s, right? And so civil rights, human rights, etc., all these things inspired by other movements, the peace movement, etc., right? But the Indigenous people were learning again, right, about their way of life, culture, spirituality, because they were all just coming out of this horrific experience called the residential schools, right? Well, that everybody's learning about now. Right? And that went on for a very long time, guys. So they're learning about that. So they came out of that broken, right? And so I'm constantly reminding these young people, right? The generation, right, did all the work, right? Human rights, civil rights, American Indian movement, Black Panthers, etc., right? They're all interconnected. And I'm constantly reminding the young people how much they did for us, right? So we acknowledge in that generation, right? And you have to remember, there was just a handful, guys, right? It wasn't, the rest were all just doing other things, right? But there was just a handful of them fighting for everything so the next generation could learn about the treaties, right? This is why most Europeans don't know about the treaties unless you go to, you're stuck in some university, right? Point is, they did all that for us. And so Murray, right, was a lawyer, became a judge, truth and reconciliation, the whole thing, part of that, everything. Parents were, but that generation did all the work for us. So I just want to acknowledge that generation, right? And that's not just Native, right? That's the ones. There's very few of them left anymore, right? Except my friend here who was there, witnessed it all, right? And so, but the point is, very few of them are left. And so reminding that all the work. So go back. So this is why we don't know about the treaties, right? This is why we don't know about the residential schools. This is why the youth, the children today are learning that dark chapter, right, in Canadian history. It's very painful. But it's a conversation that we're trying to have. And the youth get very kind of, because I don't blame them either. It's yes, you're aware, right? Us older ones here, we're aware this is an instant culture, right? Instant, everything is instant, right? Instant, so gratification, etc., right? They can't even put their phones down, right? So, I'm not knocking them, but it's set up that way.
Yeah.
Right? So, but it's a tool they should use, and they should look at those things. Everything I've talked about, you can ask Grandfather Google, right? About the Royal Proclamation, the Indian Act, Doctrine of Discovery. It's up to you, right? People listening, it's all there, right? All that information is there. It's up to you to look it up and educate yourselves. And so the youth are learning that in the school about the residential schools, the treaties, etc., territories. Talking about the land acknowledgement, I'll just say this about it.
Yeah.
We see it as a microstep in the right direction. That's all it is, right?
That's right.
It's just a microstep. Just one little microstep in a direction to have a conversation. And so, and I think, and I was thinking about Courage My Love, because my parents were there, right? They used to buy their clothes there. Remember when back, it was, and it's great to hear that it's still there, right? 'Cause there's
Yeah.
still some good roots here, right? And everything, but it's all related towards that. You just gotta dig a little more in history, right, and all of that. And you told me some little more of the history of this place, right? But, yeah, I think it's important. The youth need to know that, and talking about the treaties, and I have no idea if governments will come to terms with them and honor them. But this is, this is where the fight goes on. I'm gonna end it with this, right? It's up to them to do it, the youth, right? To keep the fight going, right? The struggle, right? Keep that conversation going, and I'm very optimistic about that. I really am, because it's hard not to talk about this stuff and sound gloomy.
Yeah.
Because it's a dark, ugly history, right? And I wanna leave you on a positive note, right? But I don't wanna sell you the drug of hope either, right? Because it is a drug, right? Because what does it mean? I'm waiting around for something to happen. That's all it means, the definition of the word. And it's just like, and so that word gets thrown around a lot. So to be optimistic about it and to say, okay, well, hope would change, and we'll throw that in there, right? There was a president not too long ago sold a whole generation on that. Look what happened to his people. Nothing. His people are still, the majority of them still in prison, the majority of them are still impoverished, etc. Right? So I don't know where to go with that word, right? It's almost like a drug, right? It's a very nice word, and it puts us in a nice state, but we need to go beyond that. And that's what truth and reconciliation is about, to tell the truth, right? It's ugly, right? It's painful for some of us, and then we reconcile, right? All that means is friendly relations again. Because the First Nations people, when the Europeans came here, they didn't know how to live, they didn't know how to thrive, they were starving, and we took pity on them, right? We said, okay, here, you're human beings, right? So we fed them, right? And there's that part, right? And everything, so there's the truth, and there's all of this, but things have changed, right? So that to reconcile with that is, I think it's very important. We all have to reconcile, right, within ourselves first. I think that's why I pointed to that direction. Nothing's gonna happen if you don't reconcile with yourself first. And what I mean by that in a deeper level, and physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, if you don't like yourself, right, then it's really hard to make change, right? And so this is, I think, I'll just put this in, I'll throw this in there. I think Kensington was really about people getting together and learning how to like themselves again, right? Through culture, through experiences, through clothing, through sharing and everything, right? Because they all came out of this, right? Forced to come here, a lot of them, looking for new lives, looking for things, right? Wanted a new life, wanted everything, and they had to deal with all the racism, right? They had to deal with all the sexism and all this and everything, anti-Semitism, everything, right? And they were just, and so through colonial thinking, they didn't understand, a lot of them didn't like themselves. So why would they, so they created it. I'm just putting this, created a community here for people to learn to really like themselves again and to celebrate their culture, the good parts of them, right? So there it is, right? Joy, right? Art, right? The spirit expressing itself and trying to have conversations again about communities and human beings, right? I think that's important, right? So reconciling with that, and then we're in the process of learning to like ourselves, and we need support. So why can't Kensington Market be a part of that, right? Again, right? And because we're in the process of learning to like ourselves again. Because I realized something about spirituality. I've always talking to the spiritual point of view. I realize it's meaningless if you don't like yourself. It doesn't mean anything, right? So learning to like ourselves as human beings and all of these things, and that's why I said that in the beginning, because culturally, the people would get together, the elder, the knowledge keeper, etc., would just remind the youth that this is who we are. This is your bone, flesh, and blood, right? Because the reality is most of us come to these circles with all these other identities that have been forced upon us, right? That's race, gender, class, citizenship, age, etc., right? And there's nothing wrong with those things. They just come secondary, right? And so our ceremonies remind us of that over and over and over, right? And so this is what I mean, right? So when they came here, right, we said this to them, right? You have your way of life, we have ours, maybe we can go down the river of life together, right? And they just didn't understand that because they came with racism and sexism and all these other isms, right? And they put those things first, right? And so, and I was really interested in the, now to the present is you have this movement again of nationalism growing all over the world, right? And it's here in Canada, right, of all places, right? Because everybody's talking about being anti-immigrant now and everything, right? Where's all this rhetoric coming from? Where's all this bullshit coming from, right? As Canadians, they never talked about that, right? To the degree it is now, right? Anti-everything, right? So nationalism comes from, I like history, so I'm gonna go there again, right? You like, I just watched the movie Napoleon, right? That guy, he started it all, right? He started nationalism. It didn't exist before Napoleon, right? The French Revolution, etc., nationalism. So it has its roots, right? And they brought it here, right? So maybe, possibility, Kensington Market is a refuge from that. Right, but you're always gonna be undergunned, right? You're always gonna be over on, everything, right? Right? There's very few of you, right? But it doesn't have to be. You can you'll always be outnumbered. That's my point. Right? You'll always will be, right? So get over that, right? Right? You're always gonna be outnumbered because corporations want to come in here, whatever, right? So remember, you're always going to be outnumbered. But again, you're thinking people, right? You're diverse people, right? Because I see this is very diverse, right? I see that, and they have to have permission to think. Maybe you don't, right? This is where the numbers even out. So if you're thinking again, right? Having conversations about what do we do, right? The numbers, I was just telling you this, the numbers even out. Right? Because they have legions of lawyers and legions of money to throw, and you're always out this. But here's the only thing that I realized, that as Indigenous people, this is how we're still here, right? We were thinkers, right? And that energy of thought just flows, right? And I noticed this, and not everybody in other cultures, but when that energy of thought flows, it does something. I noticed something. This is why I don't like being called an elder. Because I noticed something in elders and knowledge keepers and wise ones. It's not the color now. It's that person who is wisdom, has knowledge, spiritual knowledge, etc. I noticed something about them because I sat with a lot of them, right? I noticed something about them is this energy of thought is flowing, and it's flowing right here to the heart. They're thinking and they're feeling, right? And they recognize the reality for what it is, right? Most of us are not. We're just emotionally reacting what we believe, right? Or what we're told to believe, right? So again, thought is flowing again, right? So that's why I agreed to come here, because I recognize that in what you're trying to do, right? Keep that energy of thought flowing, right? And do more thinking, less believing, right? And no, I have no offense to, I have beliefs, but I'm willing to question them once in a while. These people, these young ones remind me of that, right? So the point is, that energy of those treaties, again, put it into context, they were thinking about the side again. They were thinking about 7 generations, right? They were feeling about their commitment to the earth, their mother, the earth, because that thought wasn't suppressed or it wasn't taken from them, right? They still see that as as Mother Earth, right? And she's worth fighting for and protecting and all of this, and having a good life, right? All of these things. But they have to think about it first, right? And so thought needs to be created. So I'm trying to think about that stuff, guys. And occasionally I have a coherent thought. Once in a while, I understand what my thinking is about. But I point to my knowledge keepers and elders, and I see them, and I just see them sitting, and they're in this state of compassion, right? Of humiliation. I mean, humbleness and all of this, and being in humility, and that's the word I was trying to get at, and that respect for that, right? So that's it. That's what treaties are to us, right? And they just need to honor them, right? But for some reason they don't. We can have many conversations and go around that, and go through the last 500 years of legal stuff, but the reality is those if they, again, I'm repeating myself, but I think what the world would be, how the world would look if they just honored them, right? Because there's very few of us left now, right? And our population's growing, but we were the majority here, now we're the minorities here, right?
But if it seems like the issue it's reparation. And it's reparation, and so the government or the state will not
It's beyond,
do that.
it's beyond the
They will not, and then how do we, and then it's like working within the courts, and how do we, because the erasure of the knowledge. I think that's really important, is that we're learning about what the treaties are and what the laws are. And then how do we build allyship to be able to support this? But in terms of how do we get, when you said beyond reparation, what do you mean? It's beyond, because it seems to me always like the reparation of what has been
For me,
done.
when I say beyond reparation, what I mean to say is, like for me personally, I'm not hoping or looking or working for reparation. I'm demanding.
Right.
In my humility as a U of T student, they tell me that I have quite a bit of oomph to throw around, so I like to throw it around whenever I can. And that's what I mean by like demand. As someone who they will listen to, I don't know why. Maybe they don't know I'm Native. But to demand that they give me the space to fix it myself. I'm not expecting them to do any of the work. Right, and that's what I mean by beyond reparation. I don't need you to do any repairing, just get out of my way.
Is that like what Wakabanes, I mean, in terms of its origin story, like how it came to be? Is that part of that establishing?
That you would have to ask Etsy.
I think an ally came and like basically an ally came and saw that something needs to change in the whole academic world, and the U of T is one of the finest universities in the world, right? And so, and I think somebody took responsibility, and that's what I mean by allies. We always need allies. Reality is that without allies, we wouldn't be here, right? So there's that, right? And so, and allies are important, friends, etc. And so, and I think that's important to acknowledge that. And like a lot of people say, well, it was just us. But I'll go back to the history again. My parents came out of the residential schools, and they were told something very, very clearly: get over it, right? And they said, okay, we will, but we're gonna do it with our way of life and our culture. And so that's what they did to get over the trauma. And we're in the process of doing that now. It's a few generations, right? And so we're doing that now, and so we're reconciling with ourselves first, right? Healing ourselves, because we understood this before before our white brothers came here. It's your responsibility. We say this a lot. We hear it from our director, and I say it's your responsibility and yours alone to heal yourself. But you need a community, you need a tribe, you need a nation to support you, right? Because we're human beings, we're independent but dependent on each other as human beings, and that's the circle, right? And so having those conversations again and again, so that the whole, I don't know where we're going, right? And I wanna be optimistic about it, and I truly am, and I sound like a pessimistic, but I'm really in disguise, guys, okay? I'm an optimist, all right? I really am, all right? But again, we're at the 11th hour here, right? Globally, everything. So it's all, we have to reconcile with that, right? We have to, and maybe treaties we need to make a treaty with the earth again.
Right, treaty
Right.
for them,
And say, and have a conversation with her again. But again, the majority of us don't see her as the mother, right? And we see it as this land ownership and et cetera. So maybe that's a start, right? I don't know. But we really are at the 11th hour, right? Look around, right? So anyways, another question.
It's kind of like a comment. Is it okay if I share something, a story?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so when you were talking about the nation-to-nation agreements, it reminded me of a story that my friend Kelsey told me. Her name's Kelsey Balaban. She works at Yellowhead Research Institute, and they actually just came out with a treaty map that some of you might saw. So that's a really good resource if you want to read about the treaties.
Encourage it.
But then she told me this story is called the Beaver Treaty, and both of us are Métis, and my ancestors were involved in like the fur trade. So we traveled around Canada and like basically like traded with the First Nations, or like trapped ourselves, like all the way, like my grandfather trapped beaver in that too, and sell it to markets and everything. But beaver was one of the first like commodities. It's like the original like biggest commodity, I guess, in Canada. And kind of this point in history where like I think that like there was like an exploitation, I guess. So much so that the beavers almost went extinct. And then there was a group of Métis, I don't know where they were, but they made this treaty after this with the beavers, and like apologized for the role that they had to play in their destruction. But it's so beautiful because it's kind of like, even though relationships can be broken, they can also be fixed. And I think like when you guys were talking, what does treaty mean to me? I think it's nation-to-nation agreement, but it's also like a framework for relationship. So it's like setting the structure for what the relationship is gonna look like. And I think why so many people now look to like the dish with one spoon as an agreement that, because it has tangible things, like it says like, okay, we have to like share resources, you know, that's like a tangible thing, not fight over resources. And a lot of people, like Canadians, newcomers, even like Indigenous people too, were looking to the future, like how can we, I guess make agreements that are gonna like solve the situations at hand, and fix like the history, I guess, that we're living. Adapt. And I think there's so many of those like already happening. Like even it made me think of like how there's like Jewish for Palestine, you know, that's like a group of people that have organized themselves and said like, no, we're operating from these values and we're gonna come into a relationship with this other group based on these principles. And I think it happens like in a modern context too, right? And I think a lot of Indigenous people are looking like, yes, it's important to obviously like rectify the situation, like reparations and everything, but like I think we need a lot more than reparations to like move forward as like a Canadian society and I guess like weave in some of these agreements or make new agreements that actually serve the communities that are here. So even it's been really interesting to me hearing more about the land trust tonight, because it seems like that's what you folks are doing in your own way too, is like using your own skills. And I think of Red Pepper too, like using your guys' skills and what you have to come into like better relations, to like uphold, you know, like basic human rights for people, or Yeah, so they're kind of just thoughts, I guess, but I was just kind of wanted to share about the beaver treaty.
I did want to add too about, because of hope, I've heard that back and forth, the discussion about how hope is not, it's a distraction, but then I constantly also but we need to cultivate hope, but that's based in reality. Like, we do need to be able to move forward with a degree of optimism, not to just be hopeful without understanding what the reality is, but that there is a degree of hope, because it's through our optimism that encourages our heart to be able to move forward. Because it's very difficult to create when it's debilitating, right? If you don't feel a sense of optimism or love, or being able to lean into others who have support that's hopeful to a degree, even if it's still that little bit of light of love is within us, always there, ready to be further ignited or grown. So, yeah, just to add to that.
I guess
idea.
the worry with hope is if it's not accompanied by action.
And reality, yeah, and
Then-
action, yeah.
Then it's stifled.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't create any movement.
That's right.
And it always should, I suppose.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind sharing what I'm thinking about in terms of what I've heard today. And one of the things is our governments never honored the treaties that they set up. Our courts don't honor the treaties that have been set up. Many of the First Nations, and there's so many we can't know what all of them think, but it strikes me that instead of trying to move through governments and courts, and our governments, they're still, promising to the king or the queen. They're not promising to the people. They're not, we vote for them, and then their allegiance is promised to British monarchy. So they never have any legal requirement to honor anything about the people, regardless of what they've, they just kind of created these. So in lieu of that, maybe we're trying too much to go into their world, and instead we should just be dreaming up what we really want. And what we really want is much closer to the original treaties. But they were never accepted on the other side, the colonial side, as such. It was deception and pretend and stuff, which is.
We were talking during the break about, like you said, the monarchy using the word mother as a misleading thing, because we understood the capacity, or understood the concept of honoring your mother and honoring your ancestors and honoring those outside of ourselves, right? And I think also there was a strong non-interference, a path of non-interference, right?
Prime directive.
Right, a prime directive. Live long and prosper, right? But with Indigenous peoples, it was about living alongside each other and not interfering. But the Crown also didn't understand that as a concept, right, of non-interference, because that was their goal, was interference, to be the interferer, the interloper, and take over, or capitalize, right? We didn't have that same sort of concept. My understanding of having something over somebody else, or having dominion over something, or controlling
or that urge or want to control someone else. It was more about what we can do for our community and survive together, not as in conflict with. Not to say that we didn't have conflict, because of course that, you know, but so I think that a lot of the treaties, and there's a great movie called Trick or Treaty as well. That's really good. It's a good movie. Like it's a funny title, but it's a good movie. And like Michael was saying as well during the break, how a lot of the signatures that are on those titles or deeds of purchase or what have you were forged. They were, you know, people just that they had said, sign your name on this, and people didn't even understand the concept of what it meant to sign your name as a formal, you know, contract or anything like that. And then they took and pasted those signatures onto the document. They didn't even sign an actual document. They just signed a blank piece of paper. So can you imagine, like, giving your rights away without even knowing, just because they're like, oh, can I have your autograph? You know, and they're like, oh, what's this? Okay, yeah, sure, that's something like that defines me. And then having that used against you in such a way as to,
I mean, like that happens so often. I mean, like listening to you play speaking, you reminded me of the 80s. Was it the 80s? Was Genesis in the 80s?
Yes.
Of the Land of Confusion, right? And like I relate to that song so much, and always really have.
We're born of confusion.
The Land of Confusion, yeah, because it's like the second we look away from our phones, we're just constantly gaslighted by everything. You look at the treaties, that's just a huge gaslight. You look at the courts, it's a huge gaslight. Like the Hope seems like a huge gaslight, and I'm gonna be looking right back at my phone, you know, trying to avoid all of that nonsense in the world. It's crazy, and like the court system, like you're saying, it looks and feels like a huge distraction for someone that came after all of those human rights movements. So I personally feel like it is a waste of time to try to properly phrase these agreements that, like Clay said, were based on racism, were based on all these oppressive intentions. And we will always be outnumbered. And that also reminded me of one of my favorite quotes. I forget who it was. Some great woman once said this, that to never think that only a few people can make a big difference, because in fact that's all whoever has. It's groups like this is where human rights movements come from. You know, it's really small groups of people that make it happen. And I guess I don't personally rely on hope as much for why I keep getting up and getting out of bed every day. It's more of I woke up today and I can breathe today, and my legs are working today, and my brain is working today, my body's working, my heart's working today. I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna do whatever I can. Clay and I talk about a lot about this, and he reminds me a lot that we might not see, we probably won't see any of the impact we're working towards in our lifetimes. Reconcile with that. You know, a lot of people say, well, then what's the point? You know, if I have nothing to show for it. Is that why we're doing it? That's not why I want to do it. At least that's, I hope that's not why I'm doing it. You know, it's until I don't wake up. Why do anything else?
So I'm gonna have to leave to go set up this other thing. I wanted to say thank you to everybody. I wanted to offer one additional thought. My work is storytelling. And sometimes the story that you need to tell is not about the thing, not about the thing that we're talking about, but it's finding the story that is in the spirit of that thing, so that you celebrate whoever it's coming from, as being a story about this other way of doing things, and you don't need to name what the other way is, because that way you reach the people who, if you make the story about the thing instead of what the thing is about, they just get harder set in their own ways. And in order to do that, for someone like me, I need to better understand not just the thing, but the spirit of the thing. And that is what I want to thank you for giving this evening, because I feel like I go away. I don't know the words for it, but I can feel it. I can feel it and I can recognize it better than I had before. So thank you.
Thank you, Rich, David.
Thanks, Dan.
Good night. It's a quarter after 7 then.
So, sorry, I'm just gonna close.
Yeah.
We close and just final thoughts, and I think it's, you gotta remember, I'll stress this again, they're very complex, guys, treaties.
Yeah.
It's 500 years, and it's hard to talk about that within a couple of hours, okay? Like, I've jumped around in history, right? But it's just start with the doctrine of discovery. If you really wanna know about education and educating yourselves, you can read it, look it up, and just see, and it's just mind-blowing. It's just like your head just goes, my God, these people thought like this. And they brought this whole belief system here, and it's spread all over the world, right? And it set the tone for every policy, Canadian, it's in the Canadian Constitution, guys. It's in the American Constitution, right? We brought it to them, and we took it to the United Nations, and we asked them to denounce the doctrine of discovery, and they won't. Canada won't. The United States won't.
Because it means they have to
Because
leave.
they benefit from it, right? Because it set the tone for all policies towards truth and reconciliation, right? And if there's 94 recommendations, one of them is to denounce the doctrine of discovery.
That's right.
Right? So I just throw it out there. When I think about that one, I think, and I kind of look at it, it's like it was almost a mind altering thing now, right? And so the question is, why do you think the way you think, right? And why do you perceive reality through the way you perceive reality? And you can connect the dots, and you can say, well, that's 500 years ago. But if you connect the dots, you'll understand, and then you say, oh, wait a minute, this is how I understand reality through that lens, right? And all the other lenses that it put into policy. So what we're trying to do is, I'll go to hope, right? Because I'll wait and see, right? We're at Wapamanez, and we're just a small part of this giant machine called the university, right? And we're in there, and we're just trying to make a little part of indigenize it. That's it, right? That's all we're trying to do. We're not trying to change anything, right? We're just there. And so other people can come and learn another perspective and say, okay, right? And through research, because our whole philosophy, we'll call it that, is research, ceremony is research. Right? And so it's very important to look at research. And I know everybody throws that word around, research, right? But I'll just say this about research. You're supposed to, research is, you're supposed to, not look for things to validate your belief system, okay, guys? Right? You know what I mean? People throw that word around all the time. I researched it. No, you didn't. All you did is found something to validate your beliefs, right? And call it research. Research can be ugly. It can be painful, right? So you have to look at it. And so truth and reconciliation is about the truth. So what do you want? Pretty Little Lies, or do you want the ugly truth, right? And that's a tough question, right? I don't want an answer, I'm just throwing it out there, right? So we'll end with the prayer, right? So I just, we're all here together, and the crowd got smaller the minute I get talking. So anyways,
Just been 3, it's okay.
So, no, I agree, I'm kidding. Just please,
Feel bad.
just say a few words.
Thank you everyone for attending, online. Please fill out the evaluation survey when it pops up on your
Yes.
screen in 5 seconds. Thank you so much and have a
Okay.
great night.
Yeah, and thanks for everyone for coming and being here. I look forward to seeing you all again really, really soon. Thank you, Clayton Church.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's been amazing, and Michael Brown and Sabina, Shanti, and Donna, and also all the Red Pepper people, everyone who came. Kensington Market, Community Land Trust, KMAC, everyone. Thank you very much.